Bialy Nochime, hey everyone who's watching our channel, the Nahuatl channel. I'm really excited today to have with us today Mark Araujo-Levinson, who's a language preservation specialist with the Serrano language. So Mark, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everybody.
So like we've talked before a little bit right now about how you've been studying several indigenous languages, and you have your own channel that we'll link up to here below too for our channel. But how is it that you got interested in studying California native languages? How'd you get interested in them?
Well, it was quite a process. I think with anybody that learns different languages, it's you don't find your niche at first. You kind of start with like I started with European languages like Italian, French, and then over time, and to kind of like fast forward, I started with Navajo because Navajo is the most spoken language in the United States, indigenous wise.
Also one of the
Um,
hardest.
and it's also one of the hardest. Luckily on YouTube, I found a really good friend of mine. We've been friends for years. I think we started being friends in 2016. He taught me for maybe 4 or 5 months. I will pretend that I got the hang of it, but it was really hard.
Yeah.
But I one day I just kind of asked, like, how come I never heard of indigenous groups of California? And because in school, like, the only time that any history of California was brought up, I remember was like in fourth grade with the mission projects. But even then, I'm pretty sure they didn't mention any indigenous groups. It was just the missions were built and that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
So through the Google search, I found the groups of my area, which would be Cahuillas, Listeños, and Serranos. And that just kind of made me interested, even though there was virtually no speakers of any of those languages still.
Right.
So that's how I got started with learning these languages. It
And
was really hard.
how'd you get into Serrano specifically? Because that's the one that you've got a big focus on right now, right?
Yeah, that's the one I speak the best. Well, at first it was Cahuilla because there's textbooks. Well, there's a textbook,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't know what it sounded like. I didn't have a speaker or anything like that. Serrano, I found a place in Banning that is it's named after the last speaker of Serrano, Dorothy Ramon. So I wanted to go there to see, like, oh, maybe they have something. And I remember my first trip, I went there and nobody was there. But my second trip, I got there and I met Mr. Ernest Siva. And he, to me, I know like people might have their definitions of native speaker and things like that, but to me, he's the last speaker of Serrano.
Yeah.
So not only did I finally have somebody that I can actually hear the language from the person's mouth, but he also like let me see materials that aren't publicly available.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
so like he let me like, when I would visit him, he'd let me see the book. I would take notes, and he would teach me phrases and tips on pronouncing things. And to me, having that personal connection with him really made me totally invest my time in that rather than Cahuilla.
Yeah. No, if you got that connection made, then it's a big thing. And for everyone who doesn't know, like Ernest Siva, to me, he's kind of like a legend here in Southern California because
Oh yeah.
there's so much I've seen from the Dorothy Raymond Center. He's recruited all over the place to give talks. He's
Mhm.
considered one of this really legendary kind of elder because has such a strong connection with the language, and like you said, considered one of the last fluent speakers of Serrano.
Mhm.
And then for those who don't know, also Serrano, one of the reasons that is pretty interesting is that Serrano is part of the Uto-Aztecan language family too. So
Mhm.
for us, with a Mexican background, we have a lot of Nahuatl words in Spanish, and now it's our biggest language in Mexico, and it's related to that. So
Right.
it's interesting, we're on both sides of the border. We see languages of the same language family. And so, Serrano and a lot of these other languages in Southern California are all related. What have you learned? What can you tell people a little bit about the background of Serrano? Have you learned anything you could share about the language and culture? I just know it's related to Uto as a Uto-Aztecan language, but
Yeah. Well, I think Serrano in particular, just to kind of give a general area of where it was spoken. It was mainly spoken in the Riverside and San Bernardino counties. They lived in the mountains, hence the name Serrano, the mountain people. But their territory was kind of vast. It went from the mountains to the desert towards Barstow, and there was different dialects of Serrano. And I think that's what makes it interesting, is because, like, for example, there's in the 70s there was some linguists that did some work, and the speakers spoke little different, all of them, because they were all from different areas. So an example I tell people is, for example, the word for woman is nert, and so that's how one person says it. But another person that's actually closer to where I am, and more towards Riverside, she says north.
Oh.
But they all like understood each other, even though that slight vowel difference made it still understandable.
Right.
And with culture, of course, like the animals, like birds are important. For Serrano particularly, bighorn sheep are important, and they have songs that are tied to them. And they would sing all night for 3 nights in a row. And with Mr. Siva, one of the first things that he told me about culture specifically was he told me about the 3 nights that they would sing without repeating any songs.
Oh, wow.
And nowadays, they are able to only just do 1 night. So that's how much of the culture aspect is gone.
Yeah.
So, like, to me, of course, this is very disheartening, because, I can't imagine what it was like, like what was lost and things like that. Just to me, like, that's just was super sad, but also it's really important that we keep what we have at the same time.
Yeah. And I know there was like a big village up there that I've read, basically Big Bear Lake. A lot of people have heard that name. Big Bear Lake's a famous destination, but that was like the center of one of the Serrano villages until I think loggers came in and basically, brought a bunch of violence that made it uninhabitable for the mountain. And then they came down, and then is it Morongo now or Yamava? Is that the same? Is that where?
So Yamava. So there's 2 tribal groups that claim Serrano.
Okay.
So there's Morongos. Morongo is also Cahuilla. The only one that's exclusively Serrano would be San Manuel, which their resort is Yamava, but they are also Serrano. But if you ask them, so one key difference between the two was, like, for example, if I asked Mr. Siva, like, what are you, like, in Serrano, he would say, oh, I'm Maarrēngā. If I asked somebody at San Manuel, they would say Yuhaviatam. So Maarrēngā is like almost like Morongo, and Yuhaviatam is the pines. So they call themselves the pine tree people, because hence the Big Bear, there's pines up there.
So hence their clan name.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting. Then a lot of the geography kind of preserves like the ancestor village names and of those areas, right? Have you heard of any? And like, they tend to have like the ending marker like nga or something, right? Like Rancho Cucamonga. I think it's a native. I'm not sure which background it is.
Yeah. So a couple of cities that I know keep somewhat of the indigenous name. I'll start with kind of, you said Rancho Cucamonga, which comes from, as far as my understanding goes, Cucamonga would be a Tongva Gabrielino name, and I heard it's like the sandy place. There's Yoruba, or Jerupa, however you want to say that. Yoruba, I asked Mr. Siva, and he said it's almost, to him, it sounds like a slopey hill.
Oh, okay.
Then there's Ukaipa, which is actually a total Serrano word. It's a mix of 2 words. So Yucaipa, so there's Yupa, which means like a wilderness or the wilderness, and Kaich, which means mountain. So they just mix those two words, Yucaipa.
Oh, you can blend them like that.
Yeah. So like those are some examples of some words, city names that actually still preserve the indigenous name to some extent.
And I know like there's every people has had their own history. All the shared history, obviously, of colonization. There's the mission institutions. Then we have the Anglo expansion into the United States, and then so we have competing languages with Spanish at one point. Did they borrow any words from Spanish through that time period? Do you know if elders before used to be fluent in both? Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah. So Spanish, there's some like stufa, or it's for week semana. And I would say some word like cuchara would be another one. So it's any word that would not have some sort of indigenous use, such as a fork or a spoon or stove, would be all Spanish words. And they were fluent in both languages, Spanish and their native tongue. And one reason why we know that is because, like, one thing that I do kind of for fun on my own time, not necessarily for work, is I look at Harrington's notes, and Harrington was a fluent Spanish speaker because everybody that he talked to spoke Spanish too. Like that was their language in common. So they had both language spoken.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's like, I mean, on one hand, it's double colonization in a sense, because you have one group and then another group, and in such a short time period, if you thinking about the history, Serranos have thousands of years going back, but in just these last 400 years, so much change. Just hard to see and think of how much change has happened about since then.
Yeah, I think one thing that's interesting, and it's obviously kind of, it's sad when we say a language goes extinct. I mean, I don't really like to use that term. I like to say dormant, because although Serrano, there's no person whose first language is Serrano anymore. But we still have we have somebody that grew up with it. But I have to say, with all the English or the Spanish or whoever came to the California and did awful things, Serrano's, their language was still here in the 2000s.
Yeah.
There's still speakers of languages today. Or, for example, the Chumash, which is also one group I like to research, they were the first group to be contacted from the Spanish. So even being the first group that they got contacted, their language didn't go dormant until the 1960s. So like they lasted and they survived all those hundreds of years strong. Of course, it eventually went dormant, but I still think they were just as strong.
And yeah, definitely in that time period. And Cahuilla has like a lot of speakers, compared compared to some of the other groups. What do you think has been their success? Is it just a matter of where you happen to be?
I think so, because Cahuilla, they're a little bit more inland. They're more in the desert. There was 3 Cahuilla dialects. There was Desert Cahuilla, Mountain Cahuilla, and Pass Cahuilla. Nobody speaks Pass Cahuilla anymore. That language, nobody knows really anything about. The only thing we have is a couple of words that people of other Cahuilla speakers knew or heard. Mountain Cahuilla is the most documented, but it's not really as spoken anymore. Desert Cahuilla is the only one that actually has native speakers still. And even then, I would say it has to be less than 7. And they're all elderly.
Oh, okay.
So they're quite on the edge too.
Gotcha. Yeah, the book I read might be outdated. Back when there were about 30 speakers.
Yeah,
might be that textbook that you mentioned before.
Yeah. Let's see. Do I even? So this is the book, right, that I started with. So yeah, this would be Mountain Cahuilla. And actually, I bought this. I don't know. I think I bought this for like $20. And it just so happened to be signed. It just so happened to be signed.
Wow.
So who would I mean, that's crazy. I bought this. it was out of print for a long time, and I think I bought it on, I don't know, was it Amazon or eBay, one of the two, and it just happened to be $20. So I was like, what the heck?
You got one of the lucky few copies. Luckily, I have found a PDF version of it.
Oh, okay.
In case anyone's interested, I can provide that one too.
Yeah, it's a good resource. There's a lot of, not a lot. There's some Spanish words that that can be used. Like there was real Cahuilla words for. So like some of the Spanish words there are Cahuilla words, but I think regardless, this is still a really good resource to get an idea of what the language was like, at least.
Yeah. For a lot of our languages, languages in our area, we can't. There's not too many materials, so every material counts, right?
Right.
So tell us a little bit about the work you do then. You with this position as language preservation specialist. How did it come about that you got that position or were able to receive it? Are there other people doing it too?
Well, I was doing Serrano. I started learning Serrano in 2017. By late 2018, I had a good grasp on the language. I guess so much so that Mr. Siva and also a friend of his that works at the center told, I guess they told somebody about me, and soon enough, I'm working at the job I'm at now. One of the, I guess, to put my job in a nutshell, is to, well, it's not Serrano language, but it's just language, and they have two languages, so I can't just like be totally biased with Serrano. I have to make sure Cahuilla gets its due diligence too.
Oh, okay.
So like I try my best to give both languages as equal paid attention to. And I might not teach Cahuilla, but the Serrano, at least that's what I do specifically, teach kids from preschool, and I even do adults. So it's just making sure that the tribes have everything that they need with these languages. So finding old recordings, finding documents, finding, because in the end of the day, it's their language, and I have to make sure that whenever like I leave, they have something to stand on. It's like they need these things.
Yeah. I was going to the University of Redlands for about 2.5 years, I think. And in that time, I got involved with the local chapter, the Indigenous Students Group.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the cool things is I think every Thursday for like one semester, they would have the children come from the Serrano group, and they'd come with like 2 teacher assistants, and then we would all play like a game for about an hour. It was like an hour-long lessons. It was usually centered around like animals, I think. So I think, yeah, I remember it was a lot to do with animals. So just games about memorizing animal names at that time. What kind of activities do you usually do? What style do you like?
I like to make it, well, depending on the age group, because like preschoolers or kindergartners, they're gonna have a different mindset than like some 7th graders, mm-hmm. Right? So with the little kids, it's just speak as much as you can.
Yeah.
Because I'm fortunate enough to be able to talk in Serrano most of the time.
Oh wow.
Because the little kids, it's a lot of repetition. Like I remember like saying to like we want it, which means do you want it? And kind of like me just doing over and over again, and they see like my hand is extending out, and they'll eventually reach for it, and they'll say yes or something like that. Might not in Serrano, but as long as they try to see what I'm doing and try to get some context clues that they might pick up on what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And with the older kids, it's more like you have to be a little bit more creative in terms of, you might, for example, I did Price is Right in Serrano, or or Uno, or that one has to be a little bit more hands-on like that, because teenagers and attitudes.
Yeah, so. Yeah. There's a lot to be said just about being immersed in it, like what you've mentioned too. Because I mean, you think about it. With other kids, let's say like a lot of kids who come from another country, students come from like Central America, let's say, just come over, and the school system, they just put into a classroom, and you just expected to just you get some services, you get some support obviously too, but a lot of it is just being in the classroom and then just listening. And after a couple of years, every teacher knows it won't take too long for the kids to pick up on the language, about at least 3 years, just to get the basic fluency. And then, the more advanced fluency comes a little bit later, but
right.
it's totally possible through that immersion. But of course, at the same time, you're one person, and there's, I'm sure, thousands of people in the tribe today.
Yeah, I think, just like, put it simply, they're the kids. I mean, of course, like, they're little kids and they absorb a lot, but they have to learn. I mean, they're still learning English, right? And then I'm trying to show them Serrano, and then somebody else just shows them Cahuilla. So they're learning 3 languages at once.
Oh, okay.
So it's like, it's just like a battle sometimes, because you have to try your best in every aspect, and they're bound to forget, but that's okay. You just, the next year or whatever, you just reinforce it again and reinforce it again.
Is there anyone else doing any lessons like in their school system? I think, are there some schools that are funded or partially run through the tribes?
Well, they have their own school. Morongo does. I mean, on their reservation. But no, not like public schools. There's nothing, except for like the universities. For example, you see Riverside, they have Cahuilla classes now. Cal State San Bernardino, they offer Cahuilla, they offer Serrano, they offer Liseño. Funny, believe it or not, the main linguist that worked on all these languages, he worked on Liseño, Cahuilla, Serrano. Dr. Eric Elliott, his wife speaks Nahuatl.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so he actually does Nahuatl too.
Just a doing everything kind of guy.
Yeah, he does everything, and then he does Cupeño too, which is not really, they're smaller group compared to the rest of them, but yeah, he's doing all of them.
I mean, that's awesome. I think all these people who've learned the language and studied it is pretty awesome. But at the same time, I do get surprised that the schools have done in public education done so little, and even researching the basics of whose land are we on, or what traditional people live here besides just California Indians, as a general thing. Because I mean, we're in the area of like 20 million people here in Southern California, and for all the languages we have, people know close to nothing. Like,
yeah,
I think I was carrying around my Cahuilla book for a little bit, and people would be like, "What's that?" Then you have to explain everything. A lot of
all the background and everything.
Everything, yeah. And so yeah, the people who live there.
It's like, to me, like, it's a kind of a sad state of affairs. And I mean, of course, like, I was ignorant too. I'm not saying I knew this stuff, but people know their casinos. They don't know the people.
That's true.
It's sad.
Yeah.
I mean, I was that guy too at one point, but starting this journey, it really opened my eyes to a lot of things.
And how's the community responded when you do the classes?
Well,
are they pretty interested? Is there a lot of interest you see, or or just depends on the person?
Well, honestly, it's like the battle between the 2 languages, because people want to learn both.
Oh, okay.
So like, like I said earlier, it's more like, if they might be focusing, like I'll say, on Cahuilla now, but I'm always happy to provide the resources for Serrano when they're interested. So it's like Cahuilla Serrano is kind of like that.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it varies.
Is there little contentious, like, between the both sides, or people just have their lean towards one or the other kind of thing?
I would say it's more lean towards the other.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, because I'm sure a lot of people have ancestry on both sides in some respect too.
Right. And honestly, like, I don't blame them, because like, Cahuilla is technically still spoken. Serrano is technically not, if you look at it that way. Like, Serrano's technically not spoken anymore, and Cahuilla is.
Doesn't have it. Yeah, same community background experience you could have where you could find speakers.
Right.
And then but they're closely related, right? So in one sense, how similar are they, would you say? Like where you study one, you can easily see the patterns of the other, or the sounds and words so different, or the grammar has some things in common?
Well, I would say the nature terms are very close related. So for example, water in Cahuilla it's bal with like a L, bal, and in Serrano it's bot,
Hmm.
and then or ground or the earth in Cahuilla it's temal, in Serrano it's thurvat. So they kind of has like the th in there. But when it like really like gets off the rails, and I kind of heard this joke saying Serrano was out in left field compared to the other languages.
Oh.
Let's say I want to say I don't know, I'm talking. Let's just do that example. In Cahuilla, I would say nekuk tishkal. In Serrano, I would say wura wura nin. So it's like what happened there. So
and the prefixes are totally different then?
No, not really. So for example, in Cahuilla, for example, I is ne.
Okay.
In Serrano, it's n.
Okay.
In Cahuilla, you is et. And Serrano, it's umit. But it's like, there's some similarities like with suffixes and stuff like that. But I would say Cahuilla is a little bit more strict grammatically.
Okay.
So for example, if I'm saying I'm talking to you, there is a certain prefix that has to indicate that it's I is the subject and you are the object.
Okay, that's not what me too.
Yeah, so like it's a combined prefix. So instead, like earlier I said nekuk tashkal, I'm talking, but there's no object there. But if I'm saying I'm talking to you, I would say en kuk tashkal.
Okay, yeah.
So
it's a particular one that provides that relationship between I to you.
Yeah. Serrano doesn't have that, or they for IU, IU they don't have that. For certain ones they do, but not for all of them. So for example,
if I'm Serrano, they split them up then? There's one for I and one for you?
Yeah, so like for like I said I'm talking, I would say wura wura nin. But if I'm saying I'm talking to you, I would say wura wura nin amuika. So amui would be you as the object, and ka would be to. So amuika, to you.
Interesting.
So yeah, Serrano doesn't have that rigorous, this has to be it,
And in Serrano, did they put that the pronoun for I at the end of the word for the verb?
Serrano's very flexible, and I think that's one thing that I kind of like. So I'll stick with wura wura just to keep consistency. So I can say wura wura nin, I'm talking. I can say wura wura nine, that means I'm talking. Or I can say nun wura wuran. So it could be at the end, it can be in the very beginning. It's flexible like that. Cahuilla does not have that, and I think to me that's what was made it more difficult, is you had to memorize all these different combinations.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah.
Serrano didn't have that, and that made it nice, I guess.
Yeah, now it has them very split. The subject pronoun prefix, then it's the object prefix, then it's your verb. And so it's very clear cut. There's only one exception, which is they do merge it like in Cahuilla they do, only when it's you to me.
Oh, really?
You can actually combine the two into a new word, but you can see the pattern where they're kind of fused in together.
Yeah, I like with all the prefixes, especially in the Cahuilla, like I can tell what part is what. Like this means I, and this means you. It's just, to me, it's just like all the memorization. But in Serrano, like you said, that is one example where there is you to me. So for example, if I said like, give it to me, I would say makai chi, with makai meaning give and chi meaning you to me. So makai chi. So like that's like one example where we do have that, instead of saying like makaim nuika. Like, I could say that too, but that's just a longer and not necessary.
Way of saying it.
Yeah.
So I did a little bit of research with Serrano and now looking up cognates in dictionaries that I found. So Serrano is way up in the north compared to Nahuatl, which is way down south. And then Nahuatl's a little bit like unique compared to the other related languages. Like other related languages down here, over there are like Huichol or Huirrárica and Cora and Tepehuan and the Raramuri, Tarahumara and Runners of Chihuahua. But now I've spent a lot of time, I guess, with this, maybe the city developers in, Mesoamerica. So with its time being split up from the rest, it changed a lot of its vocabulary from its roots. So a lot of it is very different. Even for related languages, it's very different from Serrano. But I did find a few things that have been preserved. So I want to compare those two. So for us, for sun, it's tonati. What do you? So everyone can see there's a T and an R kind of vowel that are still preserved there. Moon, we have Metzli.
Muat.
Star, we have Citlalin.
Hoot.
Vulture, what do you have? We have a word that's related from the word Wilot. Okay, yeah, there you go. But for us, Wilot changed meanings and now it means it's another kind of bird. It's like a dove. So it changed meanings from vulture to dove for some reason. Something about it. What do you use for possession?
It depends.
It depends.
So like if I'm saying my mother, because there's no word just for mother or father. You have to indicate that it's yours.
Yeah, same in now.
So if I'm going, Mom, I'm going to the store, I'd say, no, yeah, my mother. But so like that, it'd be na.
The na part, that's it. Okay.
Yeah. But if I'm saying something like, I don't know, my money, because you really can't possess money in a say. So I would say nanyu puaka. So nanyu would be like my possession.
Nanyu. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then there's like my pet also.
Ne'ach.
For pet?
Is it neha? For my pet dog, when you say my dog, you have to use a separate word for it, right?
I would say na'achi. So na'achi would be my pet, and then I would say quichi would be dog.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Yeah, so na'achi quichi, my pet dog, or na'achi wa'oruvi, my pet horse, etc.
So what you had with the other one with na, as that little part that refers to me, and now that would be no. So nan is mother, but you can't say nan by itself either. But mine would be no, so it'd be no nan, like for my mother. So it's got that no. So you mentioned something, and I think they call that I forget if it's alienable or inalienable possession, but that's where certain words cannot appear by themselves unless they're in relationship to someone else, right? You can't just say leg by itself. I can't just say nose by itself. It has to be someone's nose.
Right. Yeah,
so I think we share that feature too.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it.
Do you also have these, what they call absolutive suffixes? So that's like, if I say certain words by themselves, they have like a little ending when it's just not conjugated. But when I possess it or do something with it, it tends to drop those endings.
Yeah. For example, I like to give my students this example because one, it sounds kind of funny, but two, it indicates the possession. So the word for blood. So we have the word just blood is urch, where you say literally twice, urch.
Oh, with two ch.
And then if I say my blood, no urch. So the second ch gets dropped.
Gotcha.
I guess a less complicated example would be house, which is keech. If I say my house, nuki. So the ch gets dropped. So students just have to learn what those endings are. Yeah, like maybe older kids, like I wouldn't say the absolutive suffix or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
It would just be like notice what happens to the ch.
Totally.
kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you don't have to go into the whole linguistics of it.
Yeah, because like I don't understand it myself sometimes.
Yeah. And we speak English without knowing all these things until you think about it, reflexively afterwards.
Right.
What do you say for my ear?
My ear.
So I'll show you like ours is like my ear, my teeth, my hand, and my cheek. So I think these are related. So my ear, we have nonakas.
No carve.
Okay. My teeth, notlan.
Netam.
Let's see that you can see that the relationship there. No, my hand is noma.
Nama.
That one's really similar. My cheek
Yeah.
is nokan pan, but the pan is just like the place of, but it's actually just kan. Nokan pan. I've seen something that was like nokam, something like that. Something that might have been similar.
I think for cheek, I don't. I feel like I hear face more. Like face is like the corner. But face is perv.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, yeah. I'm sure there's a specific word for cheek, but I feel like I tend to hear perv more for like the whole face.
Yeah, it's rare to talk about a cheek usually. Some verbs that I saw that we might have some similarities is to eat. The bear verb is qua. You can't say it by itself, but that's the bear verb for it is qua. So like nihqua, I eat blank.
Wow.
There we go. There we go. Sleep is kochi.
Kuman.
Okay. When I give something, the bear verb of give is maka.
Makai.
To walk around, we have nemi or nemi.
Namay.
Okay, so yeah, you can see the relationships there. And I know for some people it might seem like way out, but compared to all the rest of the words, these have a clear connection you can see.
And they're thousands of miles away apart.
Yeah. There's a couple ones that linguists have found have some connection, but the relationship is more obscure. So have you heard of a word like pulin or pulin for a woman's daughter?
Puli. Mm-hmm.
Pulin, like that. So some people think it might be related to our word for pili, which means child.
Huh.
So pulin and pili. For bird, is it witchit?
Wichit.
Witchit. And so some think that could be related to our word witzilin. Witzil is the base form. Witzilin is a hummingbird. So it's just changed its meaning.
What was hummingbird?
Witzilin.
We see pitidi.
Oh, okay. That one would sound similar-ish too. For blood, they think they're related, but a lot of things have changed. So our base is S, and then the ending is tli. So estli is blood. And then you mentioned blood already, right? It was
Urged.
Okay. So it might have evolved from something similar sounding at one time. To breathe. Do you guys have you heard of something like heek or hick? Something
Heek.
like breathe or to be alive?
Yeah, heek.
Heek.
It's like to breathe. It can mean like to be alive. It can mean to get better.
Oh, okay.
Like it could be like to be healthy, stuff, something along those like lines right there.
We have ihiyot, which is your breath or your element, and
Okay.
considered like a sacred thing. So you see ihiyot in a lot of special things. Besides just what we think of breath as in English, but it's like carries some kind of energy to it. To ripen. Have you heard of a word like kwahi or something similar? Kwahi.
I know kwa'i. Kwa'i. Kwa'i is to eat. Because there's like two verbs to eat in Serrano. There's rauk. Sorry. Rauk is just eating. Like I'm just the act of eating.
Okay.
But if I'm gonna say mansanati kwa'ian, I'm eating an apple. So I'm eating something specific.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But
something specific.
but ripe, I don't know. That doesn't sound familiar.
Oh, okay. So that one might be related to our word for ripen, which is a weird word. It varies from pronunciations as an ixi or ikusi, or yuxi. So those are all different ways that people say it, and related somehow to maybe kwahi or kwahi or something like that. One more question about the words there is, do you see a pattern in Serrano like where you can kind of merge two verbs together. They're kind of like dual verbs, but what happens is that the second one kind of tells you how you do the first verb. Like you go along eating, or you come along or crying, or she quickly goes crying. You know, they kind of describe how the action does, but it's part of the verb. It makes it a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Have you seen anything like that? We have that in Nahuatl a lot.
So the first thing that comes to mind, for example, to cry is well, you is cry, you is a crying. But if I say you would be while crying, like blah 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 blah, right? So that o ending would be while. So would on no while talking, archo while making a mistake. Another one that I only seen a couple of times is for example, would on nivan. The ivan means like about. So hitit would on nivan. What are you talking about? Like I've only seen that a handful of times, that ending, but it has to do something with like I don't want to say about, but that's in that context, that's what that would mean.
Oh, gotcha. Like relate. Yeah, that'd be a good translation to it. All right. Well, yeah. Well, these are some of the similarities that I found. Like I was researching more and see if I come across any more. But yeah, just so people can see, you know, this is how languages change over at least 4,000 years, roughly, is what people think that the split has been between these two languages. So yeah. So I know Ernest Siva, he got interviewed too in a paper with, I think, the Desert Sun, and he mentioned how you know, he's really excited to be working with you too. And so, you know, congrats for that and all the work that you've been doing with the community. And you know, he said, you know, he's really counting that hoping that you'll stick around to working with this for some time. So what's your plans now to continue on with this?
You know, one thing is you know, especially the first interview with it was LA Times, I think specifically, and they kind of distributed to all these other places. Was he's kind of scared that I'm just kind of like go away eventually, which is like, I don't want to say it's the truth, but it's like, you know, the way I look at it is, regardless whether I have this position or not, because like, believe it or not, I study mathematics at the university. I don't study linguistics.
Right.
Languages, it was just a hobby of mine, and it became my job that now it's like a really important job. But regardless if I worked there or not, I still want my help to feel like they have, you know, they can reach out to me and ask me for help. Right. You know, of course they don't have to, but I still want to be there for them regardless. Because one thing that he's taught me, and I, you know, I kind of hold this philosophy, is he is so willing to like teach, you know, whether it be the language, you know, he could talk about history and stuff like that. He told me, you share this with anybody that wants to know.
Oh, okay.
So like, you know, and when he said anybody, it's anybody. I mean, look at me, for example. Like I'm Mexican indigenous. My great grandfather was, you know, at least what I was told, he was Mixtec. And so like I'm Hispanic mostly. I mean, at Levinson, yeah, I'm like, there's that part of my family too. But you know, he didn't need to teach me. Like, well, you're not from my community. You're not, you know, California native. He could have just said no. But he was so open to teaching me and spent all these hours and teaching me, and dedicated so much time of his life, because, you know, he's an elder. So there's no reason for me to hold all this in, you know. So whether it be at work or, you know, I talk to somebody like, hey, like, you want to hear a Serrano word? You know, like, there's no reason for me to hold any of this in.
Gotcha. So the would you say the Serrano community is not like one of the communities that says like, oh, we don't want outsiders learning our language or anything, or we want to be closed off?
I would say, of course, like they can't be too open, right? Like there has to be some boundaries there. But because like the whole like tribal government, that's a different entity.
Right.
Right. But I like me personally or Ernest personally, we're open as like people.
Mm-hmm.
Like the tribal government might be saying no, but I am willing to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, like if somebody comes up to me and asks me, "Oh, like this sacred da 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 da," of course, like I'm gonna say, I don't really know anything about that
Right.
because like why, I don't know you, like da 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 da. But if you want to say, how do you say the color red? Yeah, this is how you say it.
Right. There's that. Yeah, definitely the boundaries make sense there.
Yeah, so like luckily like Ernest or even myself, I kind of know like what those are.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, like there's some things that I haven't asked Ernest because of those boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to respect that,
Yeah.
and that's just for me. That's important to keep the language alive, but there has to be inevitably something's gonna go away. There's gonna be that one question I don't ask. There's gonna be that one, how do you say this? So it's it's
Right.
unfortunate, but whether I continue, because my school goal is I'm hoping to get my PhD in math,
Mm.
but I'm still gonna speak Serrano. Whether he kind of calls me he calls me an old man. He calls me Huito, which means old man, because he told me I was telling him how I speak these languages. So whether it be Serrano or Cahuilla or Cruzeño or whatever, I typically go outside, I sit down all by myself, and I just talk about how the day is, talk about what I'm seeing, talk about whatever, as long as I'm speaking.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, for me, that's my goal. And he says, well, that's like an old man, because he told me that he remembers when he was younger, he knew these, like I mentioned earlier, past Cahuilla is no longer spoken, like but he knew people that spoke it. And he recalls this one old man who would sit outside and talk, because the man wanted to keep his language alive in his own head.
Mm.
So that's why he calls me old man. And I, it's a compliment. It's at this point.
Yeah. No. And no pressure. With you.
Oh yeah.
Good job too. You got this unique position. Very,
Yeah.
really unique. Really unique.
Like,
So you hopeful right now with the next generation?
was that?
Do you feel hopeful right now with like the next generation? Do you see any up and coming talent that might come up?
I think my goal is, I mean, of course, like my goal is to create somebody that speaks really well.
Mm-hmm.
But thinking about it over like these years and stuff like that, or even just working in it, I think my goal isn't to make the best speakers. My goal is to find somebody and put that passion in them to where they want to be that.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can speak really well and everything, that's fine, but if you don't have that drive in you to, like, yes, I want to speak, yes, I want to teach it, and it's kind of, to me, like, it's like, I don't want to say what's the point, but that's my goal, is to put that fire in them and make them understand the situation, because it's a dire situation.
Yeah, it really is. And sorry if I cut you off earlier. I think when I asked you something about pressure, I don't know if you remember the train of thought.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I know it's a lot of pressure, and when people ask me, or even like these reporters, oh, like, how did you get so like involved, or things like that, and they think like I have some like linguistics background, or like, and I'm just like, no, it was just a hobby of mine.
Gotcha.
And sometimes, like, they don't believe me. It's like like, why would you do that? That's like the one question. Why would you do that?
Mm.
Like, I don't know. I don't know.
Why aren't you doing something?
Yeah, exactly. Like, like, you're asking me, like, I had to find this stuff out like on my own. What was I gonna say? Yeah, like, whether it be indigenous languages from the United States, or even North America, or even South America, like, it's these languages that are like minority languages all over the globe. It's they're a lot of them are endangered too. And like to me, I think were you in that polyglot group on Facebook?
I'm on it. Yeah.
Never mind. I can make a whole rant about that, but
There's a lot. I'm sure.
yeah, but like people like I'm learning French or Italian or
It's
whatever,
always the European languages.
and just like even like for example like if I'd say like I want to learn I don't know Basque from Spain, like yeah that's a European language but it's like a minority one.
Sure. Yeah.
It's like what's the point of learning that? Like
You
it's like
still get that even for that. Yeah.
so it's to me it's like well because they're more interesting
Yeah.
than like I want that challenge. I don't French or Italian has hundreds of textbooks I can find anywhere.
Right. You're not supposed to because you speak French.
Oh yeah. French. My Navajo friend, because he likes French. I tell him like, people think that language is romantic. It's not to me. But there's a whole different subject.
No, yeah, I'm not sure even how that term came about for France or when it came about, but
it's there. It is a lot of pressure, and I understand the seriousness of the situation. I think that's the sad part is because I understand the situation, whether it be Cahuilla, Serrano, any of these languages. It's getting across to another person that's not involved like that and get them to understand.
mm-hmm.
I think that's the hard part, and that goes back to like I said the drive, putting that drive into them. That I think once you build that community drive to learn, I think that's what's gonna preserve it, not unfortunately a handful of people, because they can only do so much.
Right.
But if you have the whole community saying yes and I want to learn, that's gonna be different.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's lots of materials also that could be used. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on, sometimes tribes spend money to create like an app or things like that, which have some resources, have some power, I think, as a resource, but are not what create native speakers. It's the, coming together to practice that community of talking that really pushes people way up.
Yeah. I think it's smart in the sense of like you want to appeal to the younger ones. I see, of course I see that, and but yeah, it can only be help you in terms of if you're just if it's like a game, you're just thinking of it as a game,
mm-hmm.
and it can only go so far.
Yeah, it definitely has its limitations. Well, I'm excited to see what other developments happen with y'all and your progress with Serrano.
Yeah. I mean, it's right now I'm at that plateau. I don't know what to ask anymore. But I really appreciate you reaching out and asking about it.
Yeah. No, we're I'm really excited to have you on here again, and yeah, thanks for your time, and I'm gonna be doing a whole bunch of interviews in the coming times with more speakers of other languages and other people who are also doing language activism work around, whether it's Mesoamerican languages or wherever I can find people who are willing to talk a little bit. So I appreciate that you're willing to be our first here for the channel.
It's an honor, and I really you're doing God's work with Nahuatl. I mean, like, yeah, there's like different small videos, but to one dedicated to it, come on.
Thank you. Well, now we say Tlascamati. What would be your equivalent?
I would probably say, well, there's two ways. I would probably say in this situation, I say Ka'ochkain, which is like I'm thankful. So the other one would be Hakuvu A'ai, which means it was really good. But I think Ka'ochkain in this case would probably be a little bit more nice.
Oh, perfect. All right. Well, thank you. Tlascamati.
Ka'ochkain.